I'm not sure what he wants, but for now, I'll answer the call from Bob. The next moment, Bob's loud voice came through the phone.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
What do you mean? I stammered, caught off guard. As I was wondering why he was yelling, Bob said,
Why aren't you home? If you're not making dinner, you're a failure as my wife, and I'll divorce you.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I tried to stay calm as I replied, I'm at home with my husband.
What?
Bob's confused voice came through the phone. What is he talking about? Me not being home, being a failed wife, and getting divorced? If he's trying to stir up trouble to ruin my happiness now, I won't let him. No, maybe the mistake was ending things with just a divorce back then. That's right. Bob made my life miserable. It's unfair that he gets away without suffering. It's not too late. I'll make sure Bob suffers too. Luckily, I've got plenty of dirt to use against him. I'll throw it all in his face with alimony to top it off. I smirked and spoke to Bob through the phone. My name is Natalie Portman. I work as a bank teller at a local bank. I'm 33 years old and got married to my husband, Rich, just a month ago. You might think it's a bit late to get married, but there's a reason for that. Before marrying Rich, I was married to a man named Bob Hayward. But Bob was constantly cheating on and ignoring me. Who wouldn't lose all patience at that? Honestly, it all started because I misjudged Bob and ended up marrying him. That's how smooth he was with his words. Being a sales rep, he was more persuasive than most people. Anyway, the more we talked, the more I fell for Bob. By the way, we met at my bank. His company used our bank for their transactions. As a sales rep, Bob normally wouldn't visit the bank in person. But he said, our meeting was destined, and asked me out.
This has to be fate.
I think it was just a coincidence that I served you tea. The day we met, Bob had come by to drop off some documents for his company. Meanwhile, I'd been asked by my boss to bring out some tea. I just happened to be the closest one on my break.
No way, it's fate.
Why do you think so?
Well, doesn't it sound more romantic if it's fate?
I couldn't help but laugh out loud. It sounded like something a girl in love with love itself would say. But there was something pure about it that caught my attention. So I agreed to one date with Bob. But at the end of the date, he asked me for another, and I couldn't say no. Partly because he was persuasive, but mostly because I had fun. Before long, I was seriously dating Bob, and after a few years, we got married. But as soon as we got married, Bob's behavior changed drastically. He had been so kind, but suddenly became cold.
Once we're married, I'd love to spend weekends cleaning and shopping together.
What happened to that plan? On weekends, Bob would just lounge around in the living room. Hey, can you at least vacuum the floor?
I'm tired from work, you know?
Even after marriage, I didn't quit my job. So, I was just as tired from work as he was. And yet, Bob acted as if he was the only one working. But I also work full-time. Those unspoken words only built up in my heart. Just being around him made my frustration grow. I decided to talk to my best friend, Emily.
Men are just like that, you know.
Wait, really?
Yeah, my husband's the same. He leaves all the housework to me. When I ask him to vacuum, he gives me a dirty look. If I ask him to go grocery shopping, he complains and makes excuses. And forget about cooking or laundry because he's awful at both. But somehow he still complains if the food isn't perfect.
Emily spoke about her husband that way. I couldn't help but ask her, "Why did you marry someone like that?" Of course, I wanted to ask myself the same question. As I was thinking that, Emily answered,
Well, I guess when it really matters, he's the most reliable person I know.
I couldn't say anything in response to that. Was Bob really reliable? Or was he just an unreliable man with nothing but talk? Those thoughts swirled inside me. Eventually, they boiled over. One day, I said to Bob, "You're all talk. Why don't you help out with the housework for once?"
What did you just say?
Bob's face twisted with anger. I panicked and tried to smooth things over. But before I could, Bob raised his voice and started ranting.
You might have an easy job as a bank teller with little overtime, but I'm a busy salesman.
Come on.
And now you're telling me to do chores? Housework is a woman's job.
Bob's voice was louder than ever. I clammed up. So, that's how Bob really felt that housework is a woman's duty. I felt all the strength drain out of me.
Listen up. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, and shopping are all a wife's job. Don't forget it.
Saying, "I'm leaving because this is annoying," Bob stormed out of the house. By the way, he came home very drunk at 1 a.m. "You're late. Where were you?"
Shut up. It doesn't matter where I was. Don't act all high and mighty, wife.
He threw his jacket on the floor and went straight to bed. With a sigh, I picked up his jacket. The moment I did, a faint scent of perfume wafted up. This smell. Women's perfume? Is he cheating? The thought made a surge of anger rise within me. I gripped Bob's jacket so tightly it felt like it might rip. "Don't you dare. Are you kidding me?" From that day on, my love for Bob started to fade fast. Every time he spoke to me, a little bit of affection vanished. It felt like blowing out a candle, one flame at a time. When Bob complained, one candle would go out. When he refused my requests, another one. Within a few months, there wasn't a trace of love left for Bob. Why did I marry someone like him? I kept asking myself that pointless question over and over. Then one day, Bob had to leave for his business trip. He'd be gone for a week.
Don't slack off on the housework just because I'm not here.
"I know," I replied curtly, looking away. Bob looked slightly annoyed. But he didn't seem to have the time to deal with me either. Bob clicked his tongue softly and rushed out of the house. As I watched him leave, I let out a quiet sigh of relief. When we first got married, just being together made me happy. But now, being around him feels suffocating. Sometimes I even get irritated for no reason. This is it. It's probably over. Maybe I'm reaching my breaking point. I need to think about my future, including the possibility of divorce. I headed to work with heavy steps. I tried to keep up a calm facade and focused on my tasks. A few hours passed. Then someone familiar appeared at my counter.
Hello. You're Bob's wife, right?
Oh, I think you're. It was Rich Portman, one of Bob's coworkers. They were in the same intake class and seemed to be close friends. He had even attended our wedding, so I couldn't be rude. Rich, how can I help you today?
Still in work mode? Can we talk later?
Rich glanced behind me for a moment. I followed his gaze and saw my manager keeping an eye on me. After hours, if that's okay.
That'll work. Call me.
Rich placed his business card on my counter. I gave him a small nod.
Anyway, about today's transaction.
It seemed he'd come to the bank for a personal transfer. I smiled as I handled his procedure. The process was completed quickly, and Rich gave me a polite nod.
Thanks. I'll be waiting for your call.
With that, Rich left the bank in a hurry. I stared at the business card he'd left behind. What's his intention? That thought lingered in my mind. After I finished work, I called Rich. To my surprise, he picked up immediately. And he asked to meet in person because he had something to discuss. Meeting alone might make people suspect an affair. That was the honest truth running through my mind. Still, I couldn't ignore whatever Rich wanted to tell me. After some hesitation, I agreed to meet him at a diner. When I arrived, Rich was already there. I waved off the server's offer for a seat and went straight to his table. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No worries. I just got here myself.
Okay, so, what did you want to talk about? I sat across from him. Just in case, I discreetly hit the record button on my phone.
Actually, it's about Bob. He's been cheating.
My heart started pounding the moment he said it. At the same time, a sharp pain tightened my chest.
Are you okay?
Well, I nodded slightly. I had no feelings left for Bob, not a single shred of love. So if he was cheating, it didn't hurt me. If it was true, I'd just file for divorce. That's all. Well, are you sure about Bob's affair?
Yeah. It's with one of our female coworkers.
Rich placed his phone on the table in front of me. There was a picture of Bob with his arm around a woman.
Even took her along on his business trips. If this keeps up, it's going to affect work.
Is there anyone else at the company who knows about this?
It's like an open secret. I think the only one clueless is Bob's boss.
Rich let out a frustrated sigh. From his tone, it was clear that he was pretty fed up. And what do you want me to do about it?
Could you hire someone to investigate Bob's behavior?
With that evidence, I could finally divorce him. All I needed was proof of his infidelity. If I had proof, I could make sure the fallout didn't affect my job. Rich explained all this calmly. It sounded reasonable. But why wasn't he taking the initiative himself? Why can't you be the one to hire an investigator?
Well, unless it's something like a security breach, affairs are private matters.
Now that he mentioned it, that made sense. A wife could hire someone to investigate her husband without raising suspicion. Basically, if I gathered the evidence, the company could handle it discreetly.
You don't have to show us the proof, and just confront Bob about the affair. I'll take care of the rest.
That's what Rich said. Honestly, it was exactly what I needed to hear. I already suspected Bob of cheating. All right, I'll gather the proof and divorce him.
You don't have to go as far as divorce, though.
No, I will, I stated firmly. After leaving the diner, I went straight to a private investigator's office. I hired them to investigate Bob, and I handed over the photo Rich had given me of the woman. Her name is Hazel Wilson. Please find proof of her affair with my husband. Since they already had her name and location, they said it wouldn't take long. And sure enough, within 2 weeks of my request, they had all the proof. After work, I picked up the investigation results and waited at home for Bob to return. If I filed for divorce, Bob, who was useless at housework, might try to refuse. No matter what he said, I was determined to stick to my decision. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to move forward. As I laid out the investigation report on the table and waited, Bob came home with a smug grin on his face.
What's with the serious look?
He was probably a bit drunk, and his face was flushed. Just sit down, okay?
What? You're giving me orders now?
Just sit. I raised my voice slightly. Bob scowled but reluctantly sat down. Still sulking and avoiding eye contact, he asked why I had told him to sit down.
So, why did you make me sit?
Look at this.
What's this?
Proof of your affair. I pointed at the photo of Bob and Hazel together in the investigation report.
An affair?
Bob's eyes widened in shock. The alcohol seemed to wear off instantly as he leaned forward.
An affair? What are you talking about?
What am I talking about? Ask yourself that question. I slammed my hand on the table, not to scare him. Look at the evidence of your affair right in front of you. That's all I wanted to say.
This is just a coworker.
You're having an affair with your coworker, aren't you? I heard you even took her on a business trip. Did you have fun? I asked coldly. Bob's face twisted in discomfort.
Well,
I don't want to hear your excuses. I have all the proof I need. At my words, Bob clicked his tongue softly. After thinking for a moment, he let out a sigh.
well, fine. I admit it. But come on, every guy does this kind of thing.
Is that really all you have to say?
Yeah, that's it. Nothing else.
Bob, now unapologetically defiant, snorted and looked away. That was the last straw, and I reached into my bag and pulled out something. I slammed it onto the table along with a pen and pushed it toward Bob. Sign the divorce papers.
Divorce? Do you even understand what you're doing? Do you know what it means to be divorced at your age?
Bob was flustered, but I answered calmly. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know it's way better than staying married to you.
What the hell? How dare you talk to me like that? Give me that.
Bob snatched the pen from my hand, and under my watchful gaze, he started filling out the divorce papers. It didn't take long for him to finish. He shoved the papers back at me.
There, take it.
You don't need to tell me, then I will.
Oh, finally. Good riddance. Get out already.
Bob tossed the pen aside with a sneer. Ignoring his tantrum, I stood up. Well, that's that. With that, I turned my back to him. I had already sent most of my belongings to my parents' house days ago. All that was left were my essentials. I only had enough clothes to fit into my suitcase. I grabbed the suitcase and walked out of the house. A year and a half passed. I filed the divorce papers immediately after getting Bob to sign them. However, I hadn't gotten around to settling the alimony issue yet. Right after I left, Bob was transferred to a regional branch in another state. There's been a lot over the past year and a half, but I'm happy now. And that's what matters. After dinner, I muttered that to myself, reflecting on everything. Just then, my phone started ringing. Who could it be? At this hour? I checked the caller ID, and Bob's name popped up on the screen. Does he want to talk about alimony? I wasn't sure why he was calling, but for now, I decided to pick up. The next moment, Bob's loud voice blasted through the phone.
Hey, what the hell are you doing?
What do you mean? Caught off guard, I stammered. As I tried to figure out why he was so furious, Bob yelled again.
Why aren't you at home? If you're not cooking dinner, you're a failure as my wife, and I'll divorce you.
I had no idea what he was talking about, but I stayed calm and answered. I'm at home with my husband.
What?
Bob's voice sounded utterly dumbfounded. Not home? A failed wife? Divorce? What on earth is Bob talking about? If he was trying to pick a fight and destroy my happiness now, I wouldn't let him. No, maybe I made a mistake by ending it with just a divorce back then. That's right. Bob made my life miserable. It's unfair that he hasn't suffered at all. It's not too late. I'll make sure Bob suffers too. Luckily, I have plenty of dirt to use against him. I'll throw everything at him and a hefty alimony claim. I smirked as I spoke to Bob over the phone. I heard a pretty ridiculous voice just now. Are you okay?
Oh, wait. Did you just say you're with your husband?
Bob raised his voice. I scoffed before answering. That's right. I mean exactly what I said. Don't you get it?
Of course I don't. You're my wife, aren't you?
I winced at his words. Clenching my teeth, I shot back. What are you talking about? We got divorced.
Divorced? Is that your excuse for cheating?
Bob let out a smug laugh. The way he laughed was unbearably infuriating. Listen, we divorced a year and a half ago. You signed the divorce papers yourself.
Oh, that. I already forgot about it.
Bob let out another laugh, and I spoke sharply, unable to hide my irritation. I don't care if you forgot. As long as our divorce is final, you're nothing but a stranger to me.
What did you say?
If we're not married, we're just strangers. You really can't understand that? I let out a huff. That seemed to strike a nerve because his voice grew louder.
Are you messing with me? Sure, I signed the divorce papers, but
Bob began his tirade, insisting on his version of the story. Here's what he claimed. A year and a half ago, I confronted Bob with proof of his affair. After seeing the evidence, Bob admitted to it. Then, as I demanded, he signed the divorce papers. Up to that point, our stories matched. But here's where Bob's side took a turn. The day after I left the house, I called Rich. Rich, I've got proof of his affair. I've divorced him.
Really? Then I'll handle things on my end.
I didn't know exactly what Rich did. But I did know one thing. He reported our conflict to Bob's supervisor. As a result, Bob's boss confronted him, saying,
I heard you had some trouble with your wife over an affair, and the other person involved was a coworker, right?
By the way, Bob's boss was a woman named Olivia Jackson. Her gentle tone made the situation even more intimidating for him.
well, it wasn't really an affair.
It wasn't? Then what was it?
Well, I mean,
Bob couldn't answer. Of course, he couldn't because it really was an affair.
In any case, workplace affairs are a serious issue.
If his affair had been with someone outside the company, it might have been handled as a personal matter. But Bob's affair was with his coworker. This became an internal company issue. If word got out to clients, the company's reputation would undoubtedly take a hit. In the end, Olivia reported the issue to the company president. Naturally, the president was furious. However, they couldn't publicly reprimand Bob. It would only bring more embarrassment to the company. After careful consideration, the president decided to transfer Bob to a branch in a rural area to separate him from his mistress. But Hazel, the woman Bob had an affair with, didn't accept that. She'd rather quit than move to the countryside. That's what Hazel insisted. And so, Hazel resigned, leaving Bob to transfer alone. I had already heard all of this from Rich, so I knew the gist of what happened. But what came next in Bob's story shocked me. It was about what happened 2 weeks after Bob's transfer. Bob got a call from his mother, my former mother-in-law. Apparently, she asked him,
Hey, I heard you got divorced. What happened?
well, a lot of things.
Of course, Bob wasn't going to admit that his affair was the cause. According to Bob, his mother continued,
Anyway, it sounds like Natalie is apologizing.
Natalie is?
Yes, she said she went too far. Also, her lawyer left a marriage certificate at our house.
Hearing that, Bob thought he had been forgiven and rushed over to his mother's house. Then, believing everything was resolved, he eagerly signed the so-called marriage certificate.
That's why we're remarried.
What? Are you serious? What kind of made-up story is that?
It's not made up. It's the truth. You were the one begging me in tears to remarry you.
As if I'd ever do something like that. Besides, if I had remarried Bob, I wouldn't have been able to marry my current husband. But in reality, I did legally marry Rich, who was right here with me. We submitted the marriage certificate together, so there was no mistake. I responded confidently to Bob. Sorry, but I don't believe you. I filed a marriage certificate with my current husband just a month ago.
Your current husband. Who the hell is your husband?
Bob's irritation was obvious, but I calmly answered, Rich Portman. You know him, don't you? He's your coworker, and he even came to our wedding.
Rich? You mean Portman?
That's right. So now I'm Natalie Portman. I have nothing to do with you anymore. I stated it clearly. But Bob wasn't convinced.
That's a lie. I know I signed a marriage certificate. Ask your lawyer.
What a persistent man. Still, this argument wasn't going anywhere. At this point, I knew we had to settle this face to face. Enough. If that's how it is, let's meet and talk in person.
Fine. I'll expose your so-called infidelity too. Be ready.
Bob shouted angrily before hanging up. You're the one who should be ready.
Are you okay? You seemed pretty heated during that call.
Rich asked with a worried look. I smiled and nodded. I'm fine. Bob's just lying as usual. Besides, I've got strong allies on my side. After saying this, I called my best friend Emily. She's also an excellent lawyer, and I've been consulting with her about the alimony claim against Bob. With everything that had happened, I knew she'd have my back. Hey, Emily. I need to talk to you about something. Our discussion, or rather, strategy session, lasted for about an hour.
Okay, I'll contact him myself with the details.
You're sure it's okay to leave it all to you?
This is what lawyers do after all.
Emily's tone was slightly different than usual. She was definitely in work mode. And that gave me all the confidence I needed. Our showdown with Bob took place a week later. The meeting was held at Emily's law firm. She had summoned Bob to the office.
Wow, calling me to a lawyer's office like this. How important you must think you are.
Bob scratched his head in irritation. Then he plopped down heavily into the chair.
So, you're Natalie's lawyer?
Yes. We've met before at her wedding. I'm Emily Turner, her friend.
Emily greeted him politely and handed him her business card with a calm, professional air.
Your friend must be nice.
Bob let out a mocking laugh, but Emily didn't flinch.
By the way, do you have a lawyer with you?
A lawyer? Nah, I don't need one.
Are you sure? You're at a serious disadvantage.
She warned him, but Bob just chuckled.
Disadvantage? Doesn't matter. The facts speak for themselves.
Bob seemed overly confident. Did he have some kind of plan? As I tilted my head in confusion, Emily began the discussion. She started by confirming the facts.
According to you, you remarried Natalie right after your divorce, correct?
That's right. You took the marriage certificate to my mom's house, didn't you?
Bob stood up, visibly agitated. Emily calmly gestured for him to sit down.
I'm sorry, but I never visited your mother's house. Are you sure you're not mistaken?
I'm not mistaken. I signed the marriage certificate myself.
Then, what about the signature section? Did you see Natalie's signature on it?
Emily hit the nail on the head. Bob faltered.
Well, she said she'd sign and submit it.
So, did you confirm the completed marriage certificate?
Well, she said she'd take care of it.
Bob's story was full of vague claims. Frustrated, I couldn't help but interject. Isn't this just another one of your made-up stories? There's no proof, no signature, and nothing.
You don't have any proof either.
Proof of what?
Proof that you're married to Rich. Can you show anything?
Bob smirked smugly, thinking I wouldn't be able to. Across the table, Emily smirked back.
Oh, we can provide her proof. Here is it. Take a good look.
Emily placed prepared documents on the table. She had my marriage certificate ready with her.
As you can see, Natalie is legally married to Rich Portman.
How?
Bob was dumbfounded. I let out a sigh and replied, I told you, didn't I? I remarried Rich.
No, this can't be true.
Bob clutched his head. He was so shocked that he burst into tears.
You said we'd get remarried.
I never said that. Besides, if I wanted to remarry him, I wouldn't have divorced him in the first place. Anyway, I think this clears things up, right?
I don't believe it. You're my wife. I'll never forgive you for cheating on me with another man.
You're the one who cheated. I wanted to shout that, but I held back because it was a law office, after all.
No matter what, I refuse to accept this. I signed that marriage certificate.
Then show me your marriage certificate. If we remarried, it should say so. Bob fell silent at my words. It was no surprise. We had solid evidence. And all the evidence was undeniably clear to anyone who saw it. It would be nearly impossible for him to refute this level of proof. It was obvious who was in the wrong at a glance. Bob was clearly cornered. But I didn't want him to give up so easily. After all, we still had more facts to present that would further back him into a corner. I wondered how he'd react when confronted with that truth. Just thinking about it made me chuckle. I watched Bob with a smirk as he slumped his shoulders. Before long, Bob lifted his head. Then he fixed his gaze on me and declared firmly,
This was all your scheme, wasn't it?
What are you talking about all of a sudden?
Shut up. Don't speak. You tricked me, and I'm going to sue you for marriage fraud.
Now he was accusing me of marriage fraud. I was dumbfounded by such a ridiculous claim. Even if someone were committing marriage fraud, there'd be more sophisticated ways to do it. Setting that aside, how should I proceed? I glanced at Emily. Emily let out a sigh. She was just as fed up with Bob's nonsense as I was. At this rate, we wouldn't get anywhere. I gave Emily a look, silently urging her to continue.
All right, let's move on to the next topic.
Enough. I'm done talking to you. I'm suing all of you.
Emily nodded slightly at Bob's outburst. And she pulled out another document before continuing.
You're free to sue, but could you listen to what we have to say first?
What are you talking about?
Your embezzlement.
Embezzlement?
Bob's eyes widened in shock. It was different from the reaction I expected. Something felt off, and then Bob started stammering.
Wait a second. Embezzlement? What does that even mean?
It means taking someone else's property and claiming it as your own. Simply put, stealing money from the company.
Bob's face turned pale as Emily spoke. He began to shake, but still managed to protest.
I didn't steal any money.
Oh, that's strange. That doesn't match the information we received.
Emily tilted her head theatrically. Bob shot to his feet, desperate to declare his innocence.
What do you mean, information? I don't know anything about this.
Really?
Yes, really. I swear I don't know.
Well, a certain woman confessed. She said you promised to marry her if she helped you embezzle money. I grinned and began explaining in detail. The story went back to the night before. The previous evening, Emily and I had been preparing at my house for today's meeting. We were aligning all the gathered information. Just as we were wrapping things up, Rich came home.
I'm back. Preparing for tomorrow?
Yeah, that's right.
Got it. In that case, this might be helpful.
Rich prefaced his story before sharing what happened at work that day. It happened when Rich was about to take his lunch break. Several employees rushed upstairs. Curious, Rich followed them. He found a commotion in the sales department manager's office. Peering inside, he saw Bob's supervisor, Olivia, being confronted by the company president.
I'm so sorry. Bob made me do it.
Olivia was in tears. Rich immediately realized the gravity of the situation. As Rich listened to their conversations, the details of the commotion became clearer. An employee in the accounting department noticed that embezzlement was occurring and reported it to the company president. Apparently, the perpetrator wasn't even trying to hide their methods. They were blatantly embezzling money. Naturally, it didn't take long for the president to figure out who was responsible. So, the president went straight to confront the culprit. That destination was Olivia's office. When the president pressed her, Olivia confessed to the embezzlement without hesitation and then made a shocking claim. She said that Bob had promised to marry her if she embezzled money. Ironically, Bob had taken the day off because he was too preoccupied with the situation involving me. Of course, the president tried to contact Bob, but they couldn't reach him.
What? What's that supposed to mean?
It means you're now a suspect who allegedly encouraged embezzlement.
No, I didn't. I didn't do anything.
Bob desperately denied it. But no one could be sure if he was telling the truth. According to Rich, Olivia was already being questioned by the police. At this point, no matter how much Bob denied it, he couldn't avoid being questioned by the authorities. Depending on the circumstances, he could even be arrested alongside Olivia.
Of course, we'll be informing the police.
Wait, no, it wasn't me.
So, you had no connection with Olivia?
When Emily asked, Bob fell silent. In that moment, something clicked in my mind. When Rich first told me about Bob's affair, he mentioned it was an open secret. But Rich had also said this. The only one unaware of it was Bob's supervisor. If that supervisor was Olivia, then the answer was obvious. Olivia must have been another one of Bob's mistresses, pretending not to know about his infidelity. By feigning ignorance, she could avoid discussing Bob's affair altogether. Plus, she even had Hazel, another mistress, who could act as a scapegoat if something went wrong. Olivia must have believed that nothing would ever come back to harm her. Then why did she commit such an obvious act of embezzlement, knowing it would be discovered? The answer was simple. It was to pressure Bob into marrying her. Once the embezzlement was discovered, someone was bound to ask her why she did it. All she had to do was answer. She was instructed to embezzle money in exchange for marriage. And the one who gave the instruction was Bob. Of course, she knew there was a risk of being caught. But if a settlement was reached, she might avoid arrest. However, she would still face social consequences. Especially Bob, he would face even harsher scrutiny as the alleged instigator. When that happened, who would benefit the most? At first, people might accuse Olivia of lying. But over time, public opinion would shift. Bob would be branded a villain. Isolated, he would seek support from someone. And who would be there in the same boat? She would be ready to be his sole ally. That must have been Olivia's plan all along. Of course, this was all just my theory. But I was 90% sure I was right. The reason I was so confident was the mysterious marriage certificate Bob had signed. If that certificate was in Olivia's possession, far fewer people would doubt her story. In short, it wasn't me who set Bob up. It was Olivia. If Olivia had calculated every move, there was nothing Bob could do now that would change anything. Sure, I could have told Bob that he might be a victim of Olivia's scheme. But I wasn't that kind-hearted. It was all Bob's own fault for cheating. I was just watching how things would play out. That was my form of revenge. This is turning out to be unexpectedly entertaining. Emily noticed my muttering, but Bob didn't. Later, Bob was formally accused of inciting Olivia to embezzle funds. Of course, he was called in by the police and interrogated day after day. To make matters worse, the case was even covered in local news, becoming a hot topic in town. At that point, Bob couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. He lost his position at the company and ended up resigning voluntarily. Thanks to the media coverage, he couldn't find another job either. Meanwhile, Olivia never wavered from her claim that Bob had urged her to embezzle. On top of that, it was discovered that a marriage certificate with Olivia's name had been filed at the city office. To make things worse, handwriting analysis confirmed that the signature on the certificate was Bob's. At this point, almost no one doubted Olivia's story. It goes without saying that I laughed out loud when I heard the news. Watching Bob get cornered felt incredibly satisfying. But this one-sided saga eventually came to an end. The turning point was testimony from Bob's mother. She had mistakenly thought Olivia was my lawyer. In other words, Olivia had been pretending to be a lawyer. Once that fact spread, the narrative shifted drastically. Bob's claims that he had been tricked gained traction. The matter came to a close when Bob filed for the annulment of the marriage certificate. Under intense questioning from the police, Olivia finally gave in. She confessed everything, and Bob was cleared of all charges. However, it wasn't a happy ending for him. The fact that he had cheated remained undeniable. Even though he was free, Bob couldn't find another job. Last I heard, he was working at a construction site in the suburbs. As for Olivia, she ended up behind bars. According to Emily, she's likely facing a prison sentence. As for me, I'm living happily with Rich. We're close enough to do chores together on weekends. Rich, grab that side.
Got it. Leave it to me.
Together, we carried the table out into the hallway. We were doing a major cleaning while rearranging the furniture.
Okay, let's take a break.
All right, I'll make some coffee. I headed to the kitchen. Just then, my phone rang, and it was Emily. Emily, what's up?
Hey, mind if I and my husband stop by for a visit?
Sure, but what's the occasion? It's sudden. When I asked, Emily hesitated for a moment. But she quickly answered in an upbeat tone.
Well, I'm pregnant, so I wanted to share the happiness.
Really? Congratulations. I'll be waiting. Hearing that my friend was expecting made me suddenly long for a child of my own. You can come to me too. With that said, I rubbed my tummy. It felt a little bigger than before. Maybe it's just happy weight. I loved how I could joke like this now. I silently wished that this happiness would last forever.